My biological family found me after decades. Then they demanded something unthinkable. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday evening, one of those quiet nights where everything feels settled and peaceful. My fiancée, Viviane, and I were lounging on the couch, wrapped in the soft comfort of a shared future. We were talking about kids, a conversation that had become more frequent lately. The thought of children running through our home brought a mix of joy and nervousness. "Imagine little ones playing here," Viviane said, her voice full of hope. It was a sweet image, one that I wanted as much as she did. But even as I smiled, my mind drifted toward something more practical, something that had quietly haunted me for years. "Yeah," I replied, "but there's so much we don't know, like my medical history. Who knows what's hiding in my DNA?" Viviane didn't need an explanation. She knew my story well. I was adopted, not through a traditional agency, but after being found abandoned in an alley as a newborn. That part of my life had always been hard to explain, even to myself. I wasn't just given up, I was discarded. But before anyone feels sorry for me, they should know my adoptive parents were incredible. They were kind, loving, and never once tried to hide the truth from me. I had known since childhood that I was adopted. They told me everything they could, but there simply wasn't much to tell. Even the police had hit a dead end. There were no clues, no names, no family records, nothing. It had been over 3 decades, and the mystery of where I came from had never been solved. Most of the time, I didn't think about it. I had grown up happy. I had parents who loved me and a life that was mine in every meaningful way. But as Viviane and I started talking seriously about having children, all those unknowns suddenly mattered. I didn't care where I came from for emotional reasons. I cared because I wanted to make sure our future kids were healthy. What if there were genetic conditions I didn't know about? What if something I passed on could hurt them? That concern stuck with me. Eventually, I decided to take action. One day, I ordered a 23andMe DNA kit. It felt like the most logical step, something that might give me some insight into my medical background. When the kit arrived a few weeks later, I showed it to Viviane. She raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Detective Matthew is on the A case?" she joked, smiling. I chuckled. "More like health detective," I said. She nodded in support. "If it helps us get some answers and move forward, I'm all for it." I appreciated her encouragement. That night, I opened the box, carefully read through the instructions, and filled the small tube with my saliva. It felt oddly symbolic, like I was sending a tiny piece of myself into the void, hoping to fill a gap I had lived with my entire life. After sealing the sample and completing the online registration, I dropped it in the mail. Then, we waited. A few weeks later, the results arrived. I logged into the website, not quite sure what I was expecting. Maybe some vague genetic insights, maybe a report on my ancestry or potential health risks. But as I clicked through the dashboard, I felt a growing sense of dread. I had made a mistake, one I hadn't even realized. While registering, I had somehow enabled a setting that made my DNA profile visible to other people who shared my genetic markers. In other words, I had unknowingly opened the door for biological relatives to find me. That hadn't been the plan. I wasn't looking for people. I already had a family. I didn't feel a void in that sense. I felt whole. But now there was a possibility that someone, somewhere, had seen my profile and recognized a connection, and I had no idea what that would lead to. At first, I didn't think much of the DNA results. My main focus was on the health information. What conditions I might carry, what risks could be passed down to my future children. That was the reason I'd done the test in the first place. I went through the reports carefully, scanning for anything that might hint at inherited diseases or disorders. Thankfully, nothing serious showed up. It gave me a bit of peace of mind, at least temporarily. A few days later, while Viviane was out on a quick grocery run, I sat down at my desk to clean up some emails. That's when I noticed a new message pop up in my 23andMe inbox. The subject line immediately caught my attention. "We think we might be related." At first, my instinct was to delete it without reading. I wasn't interested in opening any doors from the past. But just as I was about to click away, I noticed the sender's name, Angela. A second message appeared right after, this one from someone named Chris. Curiosity crept in before I could stop it. Against my better judgment, I opened Angela's message. Her note began with a simple greeting. "Hi, Matthew," it read. "I just saw that we matched on 23andMe. I'm your biological sister. I want you to know that the whole family has been looking for you for years. Can you please write back?" My heart skipped a beat. My chest tightened. I didn't know how to process what I was reading. Still reeling, I opened the message from Chris. His message was similar in tone, but included more detail. He mentioned that our birth parents had 5 children, Angela, Chris, Eleanor, Daniel, and Michael, before I was born. He explained that I had been the 6th child, and that the family had been trying to track me down for a long time. I sat there frozen, staring at my screen, barely blinking. I wasn't prepared for this. I had never wanted this. The idea of being found by the people who had given me up was something I'd never expected, especially after more than 3 decades of silence. I glanced toward the framed photograph on my desk, one taken at our engagement party. It showed Vivian and me, along with both sets of parents, all smiling and happy. That was my family, the people who raised me, the ones who had been there for every birthday, every graduation, every setback, and every celebration, not these strangers. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became. I didn't owe anyone a conversation just because we shared blood. I had built a life without them. I had moved forward without bitterness, and I didn't want to go backward now. So I typed out 2 brief, polite, but direct responses. To Angela, I wrote, "Thanks for reaching out, but I'm not interested." To Chris, I said, "Thank you for the information, but please don't contact me again." I hit send and closed my laptop, hoping that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Within minutes, my inbox pinged again. New messages from both Angela and Chris. The tone had changed. Angela's note was emotional, even desperate. She wrote about how our parents had regretted their decision every single day. She explained they had been young and overwhelmed, trying to raise 5 children with limited means. Giving me up had been a choice born of fear, not cruelty, she insisted. They had always wanted to find me, but they were afraid of how I would react. She asked me to please give them a chance to explain everything. Chris echoed similar sentiments. He wrote about forgiveness, about the strength of family bonds, and about how much it would mean to their parents to reconnect after all these years. I understood their side, in theory. Regret was a powerful emotion, and maybe they truly had spent years wishing they'd made a different choice. But was that my burden to carry? Why should I feel responsible for their guilt? Why should I be the one to make space in my life for people who had let me go? Still, as the messages kept coming, a heavy knot formed in my chest. I didn't feel sadness or longing. What I felt was guilt for not feeling anything, for not caring, and somehow that guilt weighed heavier than I expected. Unsure of what to do, I picked up the phone and called Vivian. She answered cheerfully, still in the middle of her errands. "Hey, I'm finishing up," she said. "I'll be home soon." I hesitated for a second, then spoke. "No, babe. You're not going to believe what just happened." And then I told her. I told her about the DNA matches, the unexpected emails, and the truth they claimed to carry. I told her about my cold replies and how I didn't want to open that door. She listened without interrupting. When she asked, "Are you going to keep responding?" I was quiet for a moment before I answered. "I don't want to," I said honestly, and that was the truth. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. "Then don't." Vivian's voice was calm but firm on the other end of the phone. "Honey, you don't owe them anything. You were abandoned, and you have a family." I could hear the low rumble of her car's engine starting as she spoke. She was probably pulling out of the grocery store parking lot, ready to come home. "I'll be home in 5, she added. "Okay, babe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just called because I don't get it. I don't understand why they're trying to guilt-trip me like this. But I'm done. I'm going to block them." "Drive safe," I added before hanging up. "Love you," she said, and those 2 words, simple and familiar, were all I needed in that moment. I ended the call and stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I turned off all the notifications on the DNA website. I didn't want to see another message from them. Not from Angela, not from Chris, not from anyone. But I had underestimated just how far they were willing to go. Within an hour, I started getting emails, this time in my personal inbox. I had no idea how they found it. Maybe it was something I'd signed up for years ago that connected my DNA profile with my main email address. Maybe they just Googled me and followed the breadcrumbs. In today's world, it's scary how easy it is to find someone if you really try. Nothing is private anymore, and they weren't subtle about it. The emails came fast, relentless, one after the other. Angela, Chris, and then a new name, Eleanor, another sibling I didn't even know existed until a few days ago. They all chimed in like a coordinated team. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The notifications kept lighting up my screen, message after message. "You owe us a chance to explain. You're being selfish, Matthew. Heartless. Our parents deserve to know you. You're being cruel to our poor mother. That last one hit differently. The way they said "our poor mother" made my skin crawl. Because whoever they were talking about, she wasn't my mother. My mother was the one who had rocked me to sleep during thunderstorms, who stayed up late helping me study for exams, who cheered louder than anyone at my graduation, the woman who left me in an alley. 31 years ago was not her, and she never would be. I started blocking them. Every email, every phone number, every new social media account they used to message me. I made all of my profiles private. I turned off commenting, disabled messaging, and reported every spam account. Still, it felt like trying to hold back a flood with a paper towel. Eventually, after several exhausting days of being bombarded from all sides, things went quiet. No new emails, no texts, no notifications. For a brief moment, I thought it was finally over. But peace doesn't last when people are desperate. One morning, I woke up to a message from an unfamiliar number. The text was simple but heavy. "Matthew, it's Angela. Please don't ignore this. We need to talk. Our mother is sick. Please unblock my real number and call me. Please, I'm begging you." I stared at the message, the knot in my chest tightening all over again. I didn't want to deal with this anymore, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't ignore it forever. Not if they were going to keep finding ways to reach me. I showed the message to Vivian later that morning. She looked tired, not just from her day, but from the weight of the situation we were both being dragged into. "Maybe you should call her," she said after a long pause. "Not to reconnect, but to get her to stop. We can't keep living like this." She was right. We had tried to ignore it, tried to block it all out, but it wasn't working. If there was a way to end it for good, I needed to try. I took a breath and dialed the number. Angela answered on the second ring, her voice breathless and emotional. "Matthew," she gasped. "Thank you for calling. Thank you so much." "I haven't changed my mind," I said flatly, skipping any kind of small talk. "I don't want anything to do with your family. Just tell me what it's going to take for you to leave me alone." There was a pause on her end. Then she asked, "Did you read my message? Mom is sick. She needs a liver transplant. None of us are a match." I blinked in disbelief. "How would you even know if I'm a match?" "I don't know," she admitted quickly. "But we've tried everyone else. You're our last hope." Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. "Please, help. She's your mother too." I clenched my jaw. "Stop saying that," I said through gritted teeth. I couldn't stand hearing it. "She's not." Angela didn't back down. "Please," she said again. "How about we meet somewhere? The whole family can come. Mom, too. Just once, please." I stared at my wife, Vivian. Her big, worried eyes searched mine, silently, asking if I was sure about what I was about to do. I wasn't, not really. There was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. I didn't know if Angela was being honest about their mother being sick, or if this was just another manipulative attempt to pull me into something I had no interest in. But in the end, I agreed to meet her, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because I wanted the constant messages, emails, and calls to stop. If seeing them face to face would finally shut the door on this, then fine, I'd do it. I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. It was one of those bustling, cozy places with small tables too close together and the strong smell of roasted coffee beans hanging in the air. The low murmur of conversation filled the space. I found a table in the far back corner, hoping for some privacy, or at least a bit of distance. From my seat, I could watch the front door without being too exposed. They came in right on time, and not just Angela. They came as a group, all 6 of them. My biological mother walked in first. She looked small and older than I expected, her shoulders hunched, her skin pale and slightly sunken in. On either side of her were Angela and Chris, who looked like the leaders of this little reunion. The other 3, Eleanor, Daniel, and Michael, trailed in behind them, more reserved, maybe even uncertain. They spotted me and made their way across the cafe. Angela was the first to speak. "Matthew!" she exclaimed, too brightly for the somber energy in the room. "I'm Angela! It's so good to finally meet you!" She stepped forward as if to hug me, arms slightly open. I took a small step back and raised my hand to stop her. The gesture was subtle, but clear. She paused, the smile on her face faltering just for a moment, but then she collected herself and carried on with forced enthusiasm. She introduced everyone, rattling off names I had already read in the endless stream of emails. They all gave awkward nods or small waves. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs around the small circular table. My tone was clipped, neutral. I didn't want to be rude, but I wasn't going to pretend this was a joyful family reunion either. My biological mother sat directly across from me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and watery, like she'd already been crying. She looked fragile, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in her lap. Angela and Chris flanked her on either side, like protective guards. The other three hovered, unsure of where to sit or how to act. "Matthew," Angela began, her voice soft and trembling just enough to sound emotional. "It means so much that you agreed to this." I cut her off. "Let's be clear," I said calmly but firmly. "This isn't a happy family gathering. I'm here because I want you all to leave me alone. And I want you to understand a few things." Angela's smile faltered, her brow creasing slightly in discomfort. But she nodded. Of course," she said quickly. "We understand you must have so many questions. I have one. Main question," I said, turning to the woman across from me. "My biological mother, the woman who had left me in an alley over 30 years ago. Do you really need a liver transplant?" Her lip quivered, and her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, son," she whispered, her voice hoarse and shaky. "The doctors, they say without it." She trailed off, her head lowering slightly. "Okay," I said, leaning forward, my voice still even but sharp. "Then I want to see the medical records. I want proof. I want to see the test results that say none of your other 5 children are a match. Every single one." That was when the smiles disappeared. A wave of unease spread through the group. Angela's eyes flicked to Chris, who suddenly avoided my gaze. Eleanor shifted in her seat, her hands nervously playing with the hem of her sleeve. Daniel and Michael looked down, as if the floor had suddenly become fascinating. "Well, about that," Angela began, her voice thinner now, her fingernails tapping lightly against the table. "It's a bit complicated, you see." "Complicated how?" I asked, my tone sharper now, cutting through the air like a blade. No one answered right. Away. Instead, the table sat in heavy silence, the weight of the moment settling around us like fog. I could tell this wasn't just about a transplant. Something else was going on, and I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what came next. Chris was the first to crack under the weight of my question. His voice rose slightly, defensive and irritated. "Look, it's not really necessary for all of us to get tested, is it?" he said, trying to sound casual but failing. "If you're a match, then problem solved, right? Why make everyone go through all that hassle?" I stared at him, baffled by the audacity of his response. "Hassle?" I repeated slowly, raising an eyebrow. "A simple blood test is a hassle when your mother's life is supposedly on the line?" He shifted in his seat, clearly not expecting to be challenged. Then Eleanor spoke up, her voice timid and wavering. "Well, I don't really like hospitals," she mumbled. "And needles, I get really faint." Daniel, sitting beside her, cleared his throat and avoided my eyes. "Yeah, and I've got this thing at work," he said vaguely, as if that explained anything. "I haven't been able to take time off. I don't think I could do the surgery even if I wanted to." Michael didn't even bother forming a full excuse. He just nodded in agreement with the others, like a backup singer echoing the chorus. I looked around the table, my disbelief growing by the second. These were the people who had been flooding my inbox, calling me heartless, saying I was the cruel one. And now, here they were, 5 grown adults, her real children. And not one of them was willing to lift a finger for the woman they claimed was on death's doorstep. Angela must have seen the expression on my face. She leaned forward, her voice desperate, trying to regain control of the situation. "Matthew," she said with an almost pleading tone, "can't you see Mom is suffering? Can't you just help your poor mother?" My mother? Something inside me snapped. The anger, the frustration, the exhaustion of being hunted down, manipulated, guilted, it all boiled over. I stood up from my chair, took a few steps away from the table, and then turned around slowly to face them. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "I wanted nothing to do with you people before," I said, letting my gaze move from one face to another. "And this little performance? This proves I was right." I paused, letting the silence sink in. "My biological parents," I said, emphasizing the word, "discarded me like trash. They left me in an alley. And now, the children they chose to raise, her real children, won't even get a blood test for her." "Hey, bro, it's not like that," Michael tried to interrupt. I raised my hand and cut him off. "Let me be perfectly clear," I said. "I will not be the one to save her life. I will not be your plan B. I want nothing to do with any of you, ever." The room had gone still, all the false smiles and warm family talk drained from their faces. "If I get one more message, one email, one text, one call, I will be getting a restraining order and a lawyer," I continued. "You have no place in my life." Finally, I turned to face the woman sitting across from me. The woman who had given birth to me but had never mothered me. I wasn't made of stone. I still felt something. Maybe not forgiveness, but a tiny flicker of pity. And because of that, I offered her a final word. "Thank you," I said, quietly but clearly. "Thank you for leaving me in that alley. Because of that decision, I was found by the people who became my real family. People who would have given up their lives for me in a heartbeat." She didn't say anything. Her mouth trembled as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. "I wish you all the best," I said. And without waiting for a reply, without giving them another second, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel the need to. That night, when I told Viviane everything, I expected her to be surprised, but she wasn't. She sat beside me on the couch, rubbing my hand gently, listening without interruption. "You did the right thing, Matthew," she said softly. "You know it, and I know it. If the woman who raised you needed anything, even a liver, you wouldn't hesitate. You'd be there in an instant." I nodded. She was right. The mother who raised me, who loved me without question, who gave me everything, that was my mother. And she already knew I would have done anything for her. But the woman in the cafe? She wasn't my mother. And those people certainly weren't my siblings. So I took action. I deleted my 23andMe profile. I shut down all my social media accounts. I changed my phone number. I made sure that if those people ever tried to reach out again, they'd be shouting into a void. I didn't owe them anything. Not my attention, not my time, and certainly not a piece of my body. I had already given them more than enough.